All right, good afternoon, everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the listening session for the 6th U.S. Open Government National Action Plan. My name is Alexis Masterson. I am a member of the U.S. Open Government Secretariat, and I'm joined today by my colleagues Yvette Gibson and Arthur Brunson to help lead the session, and you're going to hear from them later in the call. If we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So just a few housekeeping items as we get started. So first of all, this meeting is being recorded and it's going to be posted publicly at the U.S. Open Government Secretariat's webpage on gsa.gov, and we will also post the slides after the meeting. Please know that ideas that are shared in this discussion will be compiled and submitted as a response to the National Action Plan 6 RFI via regulations.gov, which will make them part of the public record. However, note the chat box content that will not be incorporated into the response submitted to the RFI. So we encourage you just to use that for things like informal discussions, if you want to share links, that sort of thing. We have a live captioner today, so you can turn closed captioning on. If you go to the bottom of your screen, there should be an up arrow next to closed caption, and then you can choose show subtitle. And thank you to our closed captioner for providing that service. And finally, we don't have it on here, but request that you please put your affiliation, if you have one, such as an organization or an agency, in your Zoom name. You can do that by clicking on your name in the attendee list and then clicking rename. Also, when we get to the actual discussion part, if you're speaking, we ask that you briefly introduce yourself first. So with that, we're going to go to the next slide. Perfect. And we have 3 individuals who are here to give brief welcoming remarks. First, we are going to have Daniel Schuman, Chairperson of the Open Government Federal Advisory Committee and Executive Director of the American Governance Institute. We also have Denise Ross, a Deputy U.S. Chief Technology Officer at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. And then we have Daniel Pomeroy, Deputy Associate Administrator for the Office of Technology Policy in the U.S. General Services Administration. So over to Dan Schuman.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Daniel Schuman, Executive Director of the American Governance Institute. As you know, open and accountable government is essential to a strong, functional democracy. I'm pleased to join you today at this listening session hosted by the Open Government Secretariat to hear your ideas for what policies the government should adopt. It is essential for the government, civil society, and the general public to co-create an agenda to enhance government transparency. For my part, I will be submitting comments online. I also am the inaugural chair of the Open Government Federal Advisory Committee, a new federal advisory committee focused on open government, and we will make our own independent recommendations about what we believe the government should do. This process only works when we participate and collaborate with one another in good faith. Today is an opportunity to have that conversation. I have seen that the staff of the Open Government Secretariat are taking this process seriously, and I'm looking forward to participating, and I urge you to remind your friends and your colleagues to get involved as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan. Denise, let me pass you the mic virtually.
Thank you, Alexis. Good afternoon, everyone. So on behalf of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, or OSTP, I am pleased to join our partners at the U.S. Open Government Secretariat and incoming members of the first ever Open Government Federal Advisory Committee. So glad to have you on board, Dan Schuman, to welcome you all to today's listening session. At OSTP, we work to maximize the benefits of science and technology to advance health, prosperity, security, environmental quality, and justice for all Americans. This includes supporting the uptake and mainstreaming of open government principles and approaches. We are deeply grateful for you for taking the time to be with us here today as we launch the process for developing the United States' 6th Open Government Partnership National Action Plan. The United States is a proud member and supporter of the Open Government Partnership, or OGP. It's a platform that continues to deliver meaningful reform for communities all over the world. Many of you have helped shape and deliver such reforms for us right here at home, and we are deeply grateful for your commitment to the values of transparency, accountability, and participation. As President Biden noted in his remarks at the 2021 OGP Global Summit, when OGP was launched, the goal was to advance transparency and accountability, bolster citizen engagement, and harness new technology to help strengthen government. Today, those objectives are more important than ever, and democracies around the world must prove that they can still deliver for the needs of the people and meet the challenges of today's world. As we enter the 14th year of implementing OGP domestically, we know that ensuring diverse and representative public input is critical to shaping a national action plan that reflects the needs and priorities of the American people. We are eager to hear your thoughts, ideas, and suggestions for how to use open government principles to help deliver for all Americans. And we encourage you to continue to share your thoughts with the Secretariat through the ongoing request for information process and in future public sessions. So thank you for lending us your time and expertise in support of open government today. And next, I'll hand it off to my colleague, Dan Pomeroy from GSA.
Thanks, Denise. And thanks, Daniel. It's great having you to help us out with this new Federal Advisory Committee. And good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this important conversation. As you mentioned, my name is Dan Pomeroy. I serve as the Deputy Associate Administrator for the Office of Technology Policy in the General Services Administration. The U.S. government, the Open Government Secretariat falls under my portfolio, and it really is an honor to welcome all of you to this listening session as we work together to shape the 6th U.S. Open Government National Action Plan. As many of you know, open government is at the heart of a strong, resilient democracy. The National Action Plan process is our opportunity to advance transparency, public participation, and accountability in government. And it's only possible through the input and collaboration of diverse voices from across the country. Today, we're here to listen. This session is designed to gather your feedback, ideas, and experiences so we can ensure that the NAP 6 reflects the needs and priorities of all Americans. Your input today is a critical first step in helping us identify new commitments, address challenges, and improve how our government engages with the public. However, we understand that sustained engagement with the public is key to the success of NAP 6, and there'll be other ways to engage in this process in the future. I also want to note that your comments today will be shared with the newly established Open Government Federal Advisory Committee. This committee has an important role in developing open government commitments. They'll be considered as part of the NAP 6 process, as well as broader open government policy and public engagement strategies. Your voices will help shape their work as they begin this important task of driving government transparency and accountability forward. Over the next hour and a half or so, we encourage you to share openly. Our goal is to make sure the National Action Plan isn't just a document, but a dynamic roadmap for building a more inclusive, effective, and transparent government. I'd like to thank you all in advance for your valuable contributions. With your help, we can continue to improve our open government practices and strengthen our democratic institutions. Now I'll turn it over to Alexis on my team to guide us through today's session. Thank you again for being part of this critical process.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dan, Denise, and Dan. So we have about 2 hours scheduled for today's meeting, and I am sure everyone is very eager to get sharing their thoughts. However, I am first going to steal just a few minutes of time, if you want to jump to the next slide, to give a quick overview of the background and context of why we're all here today. And this will hopefully put everyone who's on the call on a little bit of a more or less a baseline familiarity with the task that we have ahead of us. So the U.S. was a co-founder of the Open Government Partnership back in 2011. It brings together governments and civil society to promote transparency, empower citizens, fight corruption, and harness new technologies to strengthen governance. And basically everything OGP does is centered around those principles of open government, which I believe Denise mentioned earlier, of making government more accessible, responsive, and accountable to citizens. So you can see some statistics at the bottom of the slide of how OGP has grown compared to back when it was founded. And the main work that members engage in as part of OGP is developing 2-year action plans that have very specific commitments related to open government. So currently, the U.S. is implementing its 5th National Action Plan, and that plan is going to conclude this December. So a little under 3 months, I would say. And that means we are now in the process of preparing for our 6th National Action Plan. So if we could jump to the next slide. Thank you. And what we have here is the planned, always subject to change, timeline for creating that 6th NAP. So the Open Government Partnership has a 6-step NAP development process that they've created. You can see it at the top of the screen, shown by the 6 gears. And what we've done here is map that to our working timeline for creating NAP6. So today's discussion is going to feed into the very initial sort of preparation research starting phase. And those are those 3 stacked color blocks running from September through December 2024. And what we're going to be doing through this time period is analyzing inputs received from stakeholders. So for example, just like the ideas we hope to get today, we're going to be defining the problem that we hope to address through the next NAP, as well as identifying possible solutions. As I mentioned at the start of this call, and I also believe Dan Pomeroy referenced, the ideas you share today, they're going to be compiled, they're going to be put in writing and submitted to the NAP6 RFI so that they can be used in the co-creation process by the Federal Advisory Committee and agencies for the process of selecting the NAP6 commitments. Just as a slight aside, I do want to emphasize there will be opportunities for the public to engage throughout this entire timeline. Today's session is just one of what will hopefully be many opportunities. So returning to the schedule and running through it quickly, after we have a good sense for the commitments we're heading towards for the next NAP, we will begin the drafting phase. That's shown by the orange bar. We expect that to last from about January through the end of May 2025. Then you have the bright, I think azure blue bar goes from June through the end of September 2025. And that is when we expect to have a solid draft that is shared with the public, civil society, and other stakeholders. So that way we can get feedback and there can be some back and forth on possible changes that need to be made to get to the actual final document. We hope to finalize and publish NAP6 during the time frame shown by the green bar, which is within October and November 2025. And our ultimate goal is to have NAP6 delivered to OGP by the end of December 2025. That will be a year after the current NAP expires this December. That gray bar at the very end, that is just some buffer room that we've built in just in case anything unexpected comes up when we have to adjust our schedule. If we could do the next slide, please. Thank you. So getting back to the starting phase of the NAP development process, I mentioned we've released the request for information or RFI in the Federal Register. We want to gather public comments on ideas for commitments to include in NAP6. So anyone is welcome to submit responses to the RFI. Civil society, general public, other stakeholders, folks who work in government. We want to hear your ideas on how open government principles can be better embedded into U.S. policies and programs. If you see the RFI, you'll see that there are 4 topics or questions that sort of are meant to guide you through your response, but please note you don't have to respond to all of them. You can provide the information that you think makes the most sense. So the RFI has been published on the Federal Register website. And if you want to comment on it, you can comment either through there or through regulations.gov. If you look at the screenshot on the right side of the slide, there's a green button that is circled. You can, when you click that, you can choose to either upload your comment directly on the register, or you can go to the commenting page on regulations.gov. My understanding is it's just a matter of personal preference, but happy to be corrected if anyone has more information on that. You have a little bit over a month left to submit written comments, the deadline being 11:59 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday, November 12th. And all those responses will be considered as part of the NAP6 co-creation process. So our ask to you, in addition to hopefully providing feedback through the RFI, is please think about sharing this with your friends, networks, etc. We want to have as broad a range of ideas from the American public as possible. So still, I think just 2 more slides and then we'll get to the talking part. If we could jump to the next slide, please. Wonderful, thank you. So we have 4 guiding topics in the RFI to help, but we also are encouraging you, when you think about potential commitments for NAP6, to take a look at the 10 challenge themes that the Open Government Partnership has put together and use those as a framework. So these cover a broad range of issues, and they can just help structure the way that you are trying to align open government priorities and connecting these areas to how to increase transparency, accountability, and civil participation. So I should note, if you look at these, each topic has a definition beneath it, but keep in mind that these definitions are what OGP is emphasizing as the way to think about these topics as part of their challenge. For our purposes, you can think about them however you want. So for instance, digital governance doesn't have to only relate to AI. You can look at it more broadly. Final slide that I'm going to cover, if we could jump ahead. Thank you. One additional tool to help you both in today's listening session, as well as submitting a written response to the RFI. When you are thinking about your ideas, we want you to consider what makes a good commitment. And these guidelines come from the Open Government Partnership. And so first of all, they say a good commitment is ambitious. So it should aim for meaningful change. It doesn't have to be something that is entirely brand new, and it could expand or build off of an ongoing effort or a commitment that was in a previous NAP, but it needs to take work to a new level. It should also be relevant, so directly related to those open government principles that we've talked about previously. And then finally, it should be smart. And I know there are many different ways that people define smart, but the way OGP does it is by saying commitments should be specific, measurable, answerable, relevant, and time-bound. We want to create commitments where it is very clear when they are done and accomplished versus ones that could live indefinitely. So with that, I am going to turn it over to my colleague Arthur Brunson. He's going to go over some guidelines for the listening session component of today's meeting, and we can get into the reason you all are here. So Arthur, let me pass it to you.
Thank you, Alexis. So before we get started, I just want to say that I'm really excited that everyone has joined us and appreciate your willingness to share. I want to encourage each and every one of you to step up and share your ideas. If you're usually quiet, this is a great time to speak up. If you usually talk a lot, this is a great time to consider stepping back a little bit and allowing those who are normally quiet an opportunity to step up and speak. This listening session is to prioritize people who aren't going to submit an RFI. And so the public has opportunities to share their thoughts in as many forms as possible. One of the things we want to do is to model the open government principles of participation. To that end, here are some of the guidelines that we're requesting you follow. Please don't put long responses in the chat. Submit them in written format to the RFI. We'd love to get your responses and make sure that we capture them and respond with the RFI. This is an opportunity to hear from the public at large, and we want to ensure a diversity of voices, and we want everyone to have the opportunity to speak authentically and open. You can share your fully articulated, detailed feedback through the RFI process. So I'm going to ask that you use the raise hand feature to be called. And once you're called, you're going to have approximately 3 minutes to speak. If you get to 2 minutes and 50 seconds, I will likely come in and let you know that your time is close to expiring and has expired. And at that time, I'm going to ask you to please either complete your thought or finish your talking. We're also going to ask that you stay on topic. Please keep your comments focused on NAP 6 and open government themes. So if there are questions that you have that are outside of that, please feel free to send them to our website. I believe we have or to the RFI rather, for this particular session. And then also I'm going to ask that if you aren't on focus with the questions that you're asking, anything that's outside of NAP 6 and the open government themes, just know that during this forum, we won't be able to answer those questions. We're not prepared for that. We're prepared for NAP 6 and open government themes. So lastly, I want to ask that you be respectful, no interrupting or personal attacks. And if you need, please see our commenting policy for guidelines. And we're looking forward to a great session. We're looking forward to hearing from everyone. we're going to do our best to go through all of the hands up and once before we do any second hands being raised. So again, this will help it be smooth, and we're looking forward to everybody stepping up and sharing your ideas. So let's have a great listening session, and I will turn it over to Yvette.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yvette Gibson, and I am a member of the U.S. Government Open Government Secretariat. So next slide, please. On the left, just as a reminder, you'll see our 10 central themes as we focus on increasing transparency, accountability, and participation. So why are we here? On the right-hand side, you'll see our 4 areas of the RFI we will be focusing on today. So everyone, let's start. Our first area that we'll be focusing on is problem identification. What problems can open government address? What solutions can fix these problems? I'm going to ask you to raise your hands and let us know what problems can open government address. And if you need an example, you can identify some unmet needs, broken processes, and problems around transparency, participation, and accountability. Or you can explain how open government commitments can deliver a more responsive, equitable, and accountable government for anyone and by the people. So here we are. Let's see those hands. Mr. Buckley, I'm acknowledging your raised hand. Please come off mute.
Okay, I'm trying to get my camera to come on here. Let's see if it comes on.
There you go.
Okay. Anyway, yes, problem identification. I think there's a problem with the fact that the Open Government Program, which started 2 years before OGP existed, the Open Government Partnership, President Obama started it on his first day in office, as a matter of fact. And there was quite a robust start to it, but it seemed to gradually run out of steam over the course of the Obama administration. And the Trump administration didn't do any better. And then the first 2 years of the Biden administration, it didn't do anything at all. So it's good that it's getting this boost at the end, but I think there needs to be some acknowledgement that, yes, it's been underperforming for a long time, but there's never been any admission of that larger of the big picture. So even though we're been told, oh, we only want to talk about NEP 6, I don't think we can talk about the new thing until we recognize that there's this larger long-term problem. And if we can get to the root of, why did it start off so well, and why did it peter out, so to speak, then I think that will go a long way to reversing that trend, along with the trend, which I think is the declining public trust in institutions, and the fact that people thought there was going to be change. They thought they were going to be listened to. They thought they would make a difference. They thought they would be able to participate in decisions that affect their lives, like President Obama said. But it didn't happen. And so anyway, I think we need to back up. And instead of fixating on what's right in front of our nose, is to back up and acknowledge, have a discussion about what that was. And I have some theories, but I'm not going to go into them right now. So since we have a lot of time, I'll wait and hear what other people think about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley. We acknowledge what you said, and what I did hear from you is a problem is distrust. And so we're going to allow that to be one of the problems that you have identified. Would you agree?
Yes, there's I have lost trust, not totally. I'm still cautiously optimistic, and this is an opportunity to regain that trust. So, but it needs to be recognized that the trust has been squandered over the past 15 years. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to acknowledge that as a possible problem for NAP 6, identifying the lack of trust with the federal government. Mr. Howard.
Good to see you all again. Thank you so much for continuing to engage offline and online. One of the things that civil society was asking for from the US government was to re-engage in person. And over the last year, your secretariat has done that, both here in Washington and all around the United States. In so doing, you've actually fulfilled a commitment in the 4th National Action Plan, which was supposed to be part of the co-creation process of the 5th. I wanted to specifically bring up the problem, though, that we're all experiencing right now, which is finding trustworthy information in the context of a natural disaster. This, of course, was a huge issue during the pandemic, which led us to be in these virtual spaces, I think, much more so. And I think there's no question that providing trustworthy, accurate information to Americans where we are is crucial. And will continue to be so going forward. And the administration has made many impressive improvements in that regard. Most recently, the ability to text shelter to an SMS short code to figure out where to go and to reach out to more Americans. And as I've, I think, recently raised, I hope you all will consider raising to the level of the president, sending out a presidential alert to engage us directly where we are. Cutting out the intermediary of social media, where we're unfortunately seeing a tremendous amount of rumors, misinformation, and outright lies and disinformation from people who would divide the American public, both from our government and public servants, et cetera. It's never been more important, I think, for the government to be participatory, to be collaborative in the context of this moment. And I would just say to you, as the Secretariat, I personally have felt some lost trust after engaging with you because you repeatedly told members of civil society that you would not be adding to the 5th National Action Plan, that you would not be revising the commitments to be smart, as the IRM recommended. And yet we saw within the last couple of months that the White House has indeed submitted a new Open Government Challenge commitment to OGP, without co-creating it with civil society, although the OMB did engage in a listening session around the creation of a toolkit, ironically, for public participation that would then go out to be a framework. And that's been accepted. It is now on the Open Government Challenge website. You all told us repeatedly that you would not add such a challenge commitment. That's an unfortunate breach of trust. And I would like to suggest to you that one of the ways you could rebuild trust with all of us, who I think are trusted intermediaries to go to the press, to go to other NGOs, to speak with partners at the local and city level, is to go and add a challenge commitment right now this year, and then consider doing so, maybe 5 of them for next year. And a really concrete one would be the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, which was joining that was one of the very first US commitments.
Now, Howard, thank you for your question, and we appreciate it. You're past your 3 minutes, but we did take note to all of what you had to say, and I want to make sure that you were able to close what you were saying. So I know I cut you off, but I want to offer you 15 seconds to wrap that up, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Certainly. I would encourage you to make challenge commitments that reflect civil society priorities as we've submitted in letters You can look at the blueprint for accountability. And I would suggest that by doing so, you could rebuild some lost trust with those of us who've continued to engage with you and collaborate. And I hope you take that in the good faith that's offered. Thank you, Arthur.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Do we have someone else who'd like to identify a problem? Ms. Harley, we acknowledge your hand.
Thank you so much. I appreciate this opportunity. Susan Harley with Public Citizens Congress Watch Division, and I will be working with more folks in my organization to submit something for the RFI. Certainly the 10 challenge topics are broader than my work at the organization. So definitely want to make sure that we'll have a thorough and robust comment for that opportunity. But just given our moment today, I just wanted to spend my time thanking you, because certainly, you know, on the theme of what Alex said, there was a broken process in the past couple of National Action Plan development moments where there wasn't true co-creation. So I see this as our first, not first because you guys have been making some steps, but a very concrete and real step forward to have these listening sessions. Absolutely, the creation of the Federal Advisory Committee is really putting us on a great path, the RFI. So I just wanted to say thank you for all of those steps forward. In the sort of problem section, I would stress that it does feel like we have a lost opportunity. I know I raised this in previous sessions, and Alex just spoke to this, but there is a moment now, right, where you all you know, are able to put in place some challenge commitments. And so just want to also reiterate the items that civil society have submitted previously that I think could help guide those decisions, the blueprint for accountability, as well as our letters to the president on topics of open government that came from groups including Public Citizens. So you know, there's some stuff to go from, and certainly we will engage deeply in the NAP 6.0 process, but it feels like there's some steps that we could take in the interim to get some additional movement forward toward a broader and more inclusive and responsive government. So just thank you again for holding this session, and I look forward to working with you in months coming forward.
Thank you, Ms. Harley. I appreciate it. Anyone else? I can say the first name, Akil, I think, but the last name, can you say that for me?
Sure. It's Akil Vora.
Akil Vora. The
Hi,
floor
thank
is
you.
yours.
Thank you. Akil Vora, Director of Policy at AAPI Data. There are two issues that I'd like to bring up to the folks today. One is public participation, both in the past and present in terms of this process, and recognizing and being inclusive of marginalized communities, including folks from who are limited English proficient and recent immigrants, taking into consideration the barriers that they would face for meaningful engagement with this body. As I often say when speaking with federal government folks, many people in our community are not checking the Federal Register notice. So we have to think of alternative mechanism and means by which we're engaging communities, which includes identifying key organizations that represent these groups, working with umbrella organizations, and meeting communities where they are, and thinking about effective language translation interpretation. The second issue I wanted to raise pertains to the access to information provision that was raised as one of the main categories. I think a necessary precursor to access to information is the collection of information and data. And we have a ripe opportunity at the moment with the passage of the 2018 Evidence Act, and earlier this year, the passage of SPD 15, which mandates the collection of ethnicity data, right? This is a game changer, especially for underserved communities. So now we are going to require collection of data on folks who are Costa Rican, Honduran, Indian, Chinese, and Hmong. And in this way, we have a better indication of their assets and inequities. So I think it's extremely important for us to consider how the Evidence Act and SPD 15 ties into the collection of this data to have an appropriate discussion about access to information for the public and for policymakers moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your two comments. Before we move on, do we have anyone else who would like to identify a problem or a possible solution? Okay. So let's talk about, Mr. Howard.
Thank you for the opportunity. I recently completed service on the FOIA Advisory Committee, the National Archives. And I wanted to submit to you all that the recommendations dashboard that is the result of terms going back since the committee was originally chartered, as I should mention, from a commitment in the second National Action Plan, make up a really useful corpus of actions the administration could commit to taking right now. And that one of the things that we've seen as a committee and one of the things we've seen outside of government is that agencies are not currently staffed or do not have the capacity to keep up with demand of requests coming in, particularly as we're seeing a shift with artificial intelligence. I would suggest that the Secretariat and the lovely folks here review the recommendations that past committees have put there for FOIA, and then establish as part of the interagency working group in our open government a task force on proactively disclosing the records that are in great demand, particularly those around visitor logs, around calendars, around travel, and other records that are commonly requested. And do so in collaboration with the Chief Data Officers Council. I believe doing so would address a real problem, which is that the kinds of requests that are coming in that have public interest value are getting lost. Indeed, there is a huge opportunity for the administration to commit to modernizing the A-file system within the Department of Homeland Security, whereby people are requesting immigration records, or the records that people are requesting under FOIA that are, again, first-party requests in the veterans system. Creating secure means for people to get those kinds of records would take load off of the FOIA system, and I believe would make a dramatic change in terms of public feelings around the effectiveness of the implementation of the FOIA, which is, of course, a cornerstone of an open and accountable, transparent government, and could have a huge impact upon public feelings of the administration's commitment. Because right now, the conclusion of the committee that I was on is that it's quite broken. And the problem that open government could address here is co-creating a better approach to proactive disclosure that connects the demand with what's actually heading out onto fairly mothballed FOIA reading rooms. And it would make a tremendous difference if the officials from the Justice Department could collaborate with agencies that are well-funded into putting much more resource into declassification and disclosure on that count.
Thank you, Alex. That was great.
Thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Steen James?
Yeah, thank you. I'll lower my hand here. So I'm Katie Steen James. I'm the Manager of Public Policy and Advocacy at SPARC. I want to thank the GSA for holding this listening session. SPARC is a nonprofit advocacy coalition of college and university libraries. So I represent about 240 libraries in the US. We work to make sure that education and research are open and equitable for everyone. We believe that access to knowledge is a human right. And so we have been advocating for open access policies to research. And what I specifically in the problem identification area want to mention, and it falls under access to information, but also public participation. It's a problem that actually the Biden administration, in our view, has already been doing some great work on with the issuance of the 2022 OSTP public access memo that requires all federally funded research outputs, the articles that are made to report on the research that has been done, ensuring that those are immediately available to the public. So I want to thank the administration for that important work. But in terms of what can be expanded or enhanced from that work to solve this problem of taxpayers having access to the research they fund, I would really encourage as the development of the NAP6 happens, to consider ensuring that those policies that are implementing that memorandum actually require that the articles are fully reusable, and that the legal framework is such that you can reuse the work fully. So you can do text and data mining, you can use artificial intelligence to find patterns across the research. This was really, really important during the COVID-19 pandemic, where we saw governments asking publishers to lift their paywalls. And from that, the secondary analysis that was allowed really allowed people to find new treatments, information about vaccines that were going to work. So we saw like the reuse of articles really working in real time. And so I just want to say thank you to the administration for that work, but to encourage the open government work to consider expanding and enhancing that policy to ensure that the articles carry full reuse rights, because that's really how we get the maximum return on investment from what the taxpayers are investing in. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Steen James. Before we close this section out, is there anyone else that has a comment for a problem or a solution that we can identify? I want to make sure that we keep these all focused on NAP6. And before I close, call on Mr. Buckley. All right, Mr. Buckley, and then let me check with Mr. Howard. Is this in relation to the problem identification as well? And both on NAP6. Okay, great. Okay, Mr. Buckley.
Right, possible solutions. One thing I would suggest is that it is currently not transparent. That means it's not clear who is in charge of what. You have GSA, you have General Services Administration, you have the Office of Science and Technology Policy involved in open government. You have also the Office of Management and Budget coming up with a federal framework for public engagement. And it's not clear what the relationship is. Oh, and there's also the President's Council on Environmental Quality. They're currently, right now, they have a federal advisory on environmental justice session going on today. But, and they're talking about, oh, how can we have meaningful engagement? And I'm like, geez, that phrase again, meaningful public engagement. And so I get snippets from here and here and here, but I'm wondering, it needs to be clear to the rest of us if they're working together, if not working together, who's responsible for doing what, how are they working in harmony? And also OGP, where do they come in? Are these guidelines or requirements? It's not clear to the rest of us how they're working together, who's in charge of what, because you get these various outlets, these various things on social media. We're working on this. It looks like the same problem, how to achieve meaningful public engagement, public participation. But I'm very leery based on the past 15 years. I'm cautiously hopeful, hopefully cautious, whatever, that they're working together, but I'm not going to give them the benefit of the doubt anymore, because this is too important to leave to chance. So if that could be clear, that if it could be more transparent about the transparency program, that would go a long way to clearing things up and allowing the rest of us to participate, not wondering if one hand knows what the other hand's doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley. And we're going to close this section out with Mr. Howard.
So thank you for the opportunity. Two things. First, there is a unfortunately historic low amount of public trust in federal government. And I want to see that change because I'd like to see the American people be better connected. And there's some extraordinary programs run by extraordinary civil servants, including those at the GSA, involved with challenge.gov and the citizen science programs. And if the US government could expand the challenge efforts to engage far more of the American people around the grand national challenges that are involved there, around those prizes and challenges, I believe that the process of participation and collaboration through that could have a real effect on moving the needle. These programs already exist. What's missing is more communications capacity so that we can see the awareness of the American public change. Partnerships with media companies and technology companies are the natural way to do that, along with the US government using its own communications capacity to find us where we are, ensure that we're aware of these challenges, and that the diversity and extraordinary intellectual capacity of the American people is engaged working on those challenges. I believe that the participation involved in that and then seeing the outcome would make a difference. That level of trust, if we don't see that movement, I think is going to be a huge challenge for us in every single area that agencies have a mission. And the second component of this is something I put into chats. I strongly recommend that the administration put out the long overdue guidance that Congress mandated in the Open Government Data Act. And this is following up on something that Denise asked us, I believe in 2022 and 2023, about getting agencies AI ready. AI only works with good data. Good data only comes out of agencies that are fully funded, that have human capacity, and have the means to improve it, from structuring and digitizing data, to cleaning unstructured data, to having the ability to work, hopefully in collaboration with the Chief Data Officers Council, which is staffed by extraordinary folks, and get more of that data out there, which is, of course, the raw materials for our democracy. And to do so, hopefully, across all of the branches of government. The more so that we can see the legislative data, judicial data, and the executive branch's data move online and then be structured, the more we'll be able to see the kinds of tools that have previously only existed in science fiction be applied to meeting the really substantive concerns people have, from healthcare to the environment, to education, to transit, to any of the other myriad directions that the government is dedicated towards. Thank you for the opportunity to come.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. We're closing this out, and you actually segued us into our building on existing work, but I wanted to just remind everyone as we go forward to just remember that we want to hear about things that we can do with open government, to keep that in mind as we move forward. And so with that said, and Mr. Howard started us off with talking about the challenge, what is being done inside or outside of government that can be expanded or enhanced? And he alluded to that. So do we have any other people that would like to talk about what's going on inside or outside of the government that can be expanded or enhanced? I know there are a lot of great things going on. So if you know of some, Miss Honey, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Just wanted to build on some of the great comments from Alex, Steve, and others, but this idea of building upon challenge.gov for open innovation, so crowdsourcing, citizen science, prizes, challenges, using the America Competes authorities. One element of those authorities is the ability for government agencies, and this is all agencies, not just GSA, to enter into partnerships, public-private partnerships for innovation. So that's how HHS has been able to do our $25 million public-private partnership for Kidney X. So the Kidney X Innovation Accelerator to hopefully get artificial kidneys out there as quickly as possible. Same for LymeX, and now we have Cancer X. So those competes authorities can be really helpful for harnessing the power of multiple sectors beyond only government. And in all of those cases, it's been really important to get the demand signal from the public of what are our priority areas. And I liked how Alex brought up the crowdsourcing idea, because that's exactly what LymeX did when the public-private partnership first started, actually before it even became a partnership. Put it out to the public of what are the priority areas that will most move the needle within the bounds of federal government. Like, what can federal government most do to help this challenge of Lyme, a tick-borne illness, and what the community needs today? And what came out of that was better diagnostics, patients at the core of our government services and public health processes, and more education and awareness across the board. So those demand signals ended up becoming the LymeX priorities. And often people think open data, so data.gov, open science, science.gov, and a lot of those authorities, but the Competes Act and the Open Innovation Authorities have been really helpful from the HHS side. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Ms. Honey. Now, I do believe there are some great people on this, in this listening session, that know of great work that is being done that the government can expand on or enhance. Things going on in local government, things going on in communities. So let's hear that. Let's hear what you have. Let's hear about those things. Those are the great things we want to hear that we can build upon and create those better relationships with civil society. So do we have anyone that would like to share? Mr. Buckley?
Yes, I was waiting also to hear if someone else wanted to speak, but it seems like crickets. And that's actually a problem, I think. I think part of the thing is, yes, it's always good to know about good things that people are doing and best practices and so forth. But at the same time, it's also good to know what's not working, because it's easier to stop something than it is to improve upon it. And so if something's leaking, you stop the leak first and then you clean it up, and then you so forth. I'm an environmental engineer. I worked at 5 different federal agencies. So I look at it through the lens of environmental problems, So if there's some pollution, first thing you do is you stop it from polluting, and then you figure out why did it happen in the first place and what we might do better in the future. So I think there's, even though people don't want to talk about, because it sounds like bad news, there's a lot to be said for an ounce of prevention, pound of cure type stuff. Is to say, first, stop making people hate going to public meetings where they go and they are treated, if there's a highway project with all this infrastructure money going out there, people go to a meeting, the engineers in charge, whoever is in charge, tell them about their great proposal. They say, well, what about this or what about that? And they get dismissed as if they don't know anything about the road they take to work every day. Some observation, some life experience, one little piece, and they get dismissed. So the first thing I would do is stop disrespecting the people showing up at meetings. And then
So are you saying this is something that we could do as a part of NAP 6?
Well, if NAP 6 includes the federal framework that's coming out sometime soon, I'm hoping that, yes, the federal framework for public engagement that we've been briefed on a couple times in the past year, barely, but we haven't heard anything in the past few months about it, which gives me, I'm a little concerned about. We haven't even heard about the themes that came out of the request for information back in March or April. Haven't heard. There's been crickets on that too. So the idea is that if there's standard terminology, if NAP 6 somehow dovetails with this federal framework that's coming out or acknowledges it, and it's not different silos, that it can provide some standard procedures, some standard terminology, some standard practices, so you don't have 50 different federal agencies doing 50 different flavors of public engagement. So it's called public engagement over here, it's called public participation over here, it's called community involvement over here, and it's confusing people. So the idea is to stop using different words, stop confusing the public, making them wish that they had not attended a particular meeting. It would bring some semblance of order.
Mr. Buckley, you're at time, but I do want to give you 15 seconds.
Okay, no, that's it. The idea being that we need to figure out first the things that are doing more damage than good, and stop those first. Hopefully through the public for this new federal framework, which, by the way, I'd like to hear about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Yvette, may I just jump in real quick before we move to the
Yes.
next person? Wonderful, thank you. So I actually received a question, which is a great question, and hopefully it'll be of help for folks who do not use Zoom that often. If you are trying to figure out how to raise your hand, there is a little heart at the bottom of the screen that says react, and there's an option to raise your hand. So Alex and Stephen, you guys have already given some great ideas, but we have 40+ people on this call, and I'm sure you are all brilliant, and you are seeing things that are either being done well, we should do more of, or could be fixed. We definitely want to hear from you. So let's go. I think we're going to go, Yvette, to someone who hasn't spoken yet. And,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
just strongly encourage other people to raise their hands, and there is no need to go on camera if you don't want to.
Alexis, and the person, did they have something they wanted to say before I?
Yes. Oh, no, we have the person.
Okay, okay. Ms. Savage.
Hi, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm Michelle Savage, and I'm the one who asked about raising hands. So thank you very much, Alexis. And thanks for hosting this. I really appreciate the opportunity to weigh in here a bit. I'm with a nonprofit data standards organization called XBRL US. That stands for Extensible Business Reporting Language. And essentially what we do is we develop open non-proprietary data standards that are used frankly around the world, but also here in the United States, to improve the transparency of data, the accountability of those reporting data, and to generate what is called structured data. And structured data is like one of the best inputs for artificial intelligence platforms, for peer analysis. It essentially allows data to be automatically used. And I just wanted to mention that the Financial Data Transparency Act, which is a bill that was signed into law, I believe at the end of 2022, it calls for 9 different government agencies to adopt data standards for all of their own data collections. And that process is kind of going through implementation right now. And a rule proposal has been published, and it calls for data standards. And I just want to mention that the FDTA is a huge step forward for these agencies. And if it's implemented correctly, it will ultimately result in all of these agencies collecting data that is decision useful, that is actionable, that is structured, and that can be used in so many different ways. It enables enormous economies of scale, and which means reduced costs. It leverages the competitive marketplace for tools. So it's a really big positive that the government has done, as long as implementation goes forward correctly. So I just want to mention that if other government agencies that are outside of these FSOC agencies are able to adopt structured data as well, that would be another really, really big step forward, because it would result in much more actionable data. So, and the standard that they are considering is the XBRL standard, which is the one that I represent, which is open, non-proprietary. So those are my 2 cents. I just wanted to share my thoughts on that. Thank you very much.
Much appreciated, Ms. Savage, much appreciated. Do we have anyone else that would like to share?
So Yvette, no one else has their hand raised at the moment, but we did have one or two new folks put some comments into the chat. Just a reminder, because that isn't going to be able to be pulled into the response that we submit to the RFI, and it looks like you have some great information, please, we encourage you to come off mute just to share your ideas. That way we can really make sure we capture it and pull it into when we're looking at NAP 6. But we did just get a hand raised. So Yvette, let
Yes,
me
I have.
pass that
I
back to
see
you.
Gabriella, and please, if you can't come off mute, say something in the chat and Alexis will alert me and I will call on you. So thank you so much. Ms. Cantor, you have the floor.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. My name is Gabriella Cantor, and I'm with Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, or CREW. And I wanted to raise the topic of the agency website's electronic reading room, where they have their frequently requested FOIAs and some other documents. And I just wanted to raise that because some of those reading room pages are easier to find than others, and some of them are more comprehensive than others. So I wanted to raise the issue, and then kind of open it up if anyone has ideas or you have ideas about standardizing that, making them easier to find, requiring that certain documents, frequently requested documents, be posted, as well as the calendars and meeting logs of department heads, which, like I said, some agencies do and some do not. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We are going to move on to the innovative approaches. Before I see your hand, Mr. Howard, before I call on you, I'm going to make sure, does anyone else have anything that they would like to share before we move on?
We'd love to get more voices. I think of the 40 some odd folks, we've only had a few talks. So please, this is your space.
Yes, Ms. Watkins.
Hey, yeah, I'm just scrolling back to my comment here, making sure it makes it to the record. So yeah, I think my suggestion was just looking towards some practices that researchers in academia have been working towards over the past, I don't know, decade. Really, I know they've been trying to make their research public and their data public and their practices more available. And I think some of the platforms they've used to do that were the Open Science Framework or the Center for Open Science. So that might be useful to look into for your team.
Great, thank you so much, Ms. Watkins. Much appreciated. Ms. Honey. Oh, Ms. Honey.
Real quick, on Heather's point, I just wanted to say that we have been exploring that. We know that other international organizations do have platforms and ways to have public comment on a lot of things. We're kind of going to expand that search. We'd love to see if state and local governments are kind of employing any sort of technology around that as well. So I just want to let you know that great comment, and we will take that into account in some of our research.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Laura. And thank you, Ms. Watkins. Appreciate your comment. We're going to go to Ms. Honey, following her, Ms. Steen James. And before you start, Ms. Honey, Ms. Cantor, do you have another comment?
No, I do not.
Okay. Ms. Honey, and then Ms. Steen James.
Sure. Yeah, I just put something in the chat, not realizing that that wasn't going to be part of the record. So thanks for everyone for flagging that and for helping get it in the record. But my question was, are there examples of local, state, tribal, or international governments using technology to create an evaluation or assessment of how us in federal government, our agencies, offices, or programs are serving the public as rated by the public, kind of like, like Amazon reviews or Yelp for businesses? And in general, I found that in federal government, it's a lot easier when we can take bright spot examples that are in practice elsewhere and then emulate those successes rather than trying to create something new. So there's been a lot of great feedback and suggestions in the chat. The open science one we heard. I look forward to Alex's comments because I think he has some good links in the chat, and then a few other ones. So those kind of inputs I think will be really helpful. And then the approach I've used inside government, with success is rather than creating or trying to create something totally new. If we can scout around and find some of the best examples out there that we would like to emulate, whether it's France, whether it's local government, whether it's industry, and then working with the lawyers to make that happen, it's a lot easier when you can point to it already being put in practice elsewhere. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Steen James?
Yes, I also, realizing that the chat would not be part of the RFI public comment, I just wanted to reiterate and then add something in response to Heather's suggestion about open science. So Spark has a project called Helios Open, which stands for Higher Education Leaders in Open Science, and it aims to bring higher ed leaders together to advance open science in academia. The Helios Open network has a federal dialogue that engages agencies and higher ed leaders on how to make research more open in academia. So that might be, and it's heliosopen.org. That might be a good piece as well for the GSA to reference. They've got some toolkits and some other things on the website, and as well, as I said, engage in a federal dialogue. So GSA is actually not an agency that we have invited to that in the past, but that invitation is open and would love to connect about that. I also want to make sure GSA is aware of the National Academies has a roundtable also on advancing open science that many of the federal agencies are represented at, but actually I don't believe GSA is. So that may be another opportunity to make GSA more aware of the open science work that is going on. And then finally, I know I said it in the first problem identification part, but one existing thing happening inside government is the OSCP memo on public access that is being implemented now with federal agencies developing their policies. And as I said before, I think a way we can build on that is to ensure that the articles being produced from federally funded research are fully reusable by the public. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Before we move on, I'd like to hear from our state and local listeners. Do you have anything you would like to share on some great existing work that can be expanded on or enhanced? I know you're doing some great work. And not to put anybody on under the spotlight, but let's hear from you. Any state and locals? Courtney Anderson.
Hi, Yvette. I'm not state and local, but I just wanted to give my input just on a couple things. Just first of all, I think it's really important to consider in the next national action plan, like how we can make sure we're incorporating open government principles across government-wide policies. I think Alexis touched on that a little bit in the beginning, but I think it's really important to do that, especially, in government-wide policies put out by OMB, and maybe as we transition to the next president's management agenda, it would be great to see open government included in that and principles within each of the CAP goals. I also think it would be interesting to look at, just to look at another maybe commitment is support for the National Secure Data Service that's being implemented through NSF. I think that, that's trying to help to provide more access to statistical data to researchers in an equitable way. So it would be interesting to look at that as well. So thank you, Yvette.
Great. Thank you so much, Courtney. All right, state and locals, before I call on Mr. Howard, the floor is yours. All right, Mr. Howard.
So on the state and local side, here in the District of Columbia, which is not quite a state, but perhaps should be, there is a project which has gotten mothballed, which I dropped in the chat, grade.dc.gov. This was an effort to try to get public ratings to be put onto the different agencies. While it did not, in the end, get institutionalized and adopted as an ongoing effort, it is an important, I think, pilot for that kind of approach. So too is the use of 311 requests. That kind of data can be quite relevant, and it would be helpful to think about how and where that could be used. There's a state and local and federal connection here. One of the most important open data projects in United States history was recovery.gov. That indeed informed the creation of the Data Act. I think there's a huge opportunity to engage the American people at the local level by identifying infrastructure projects that were built with those dollars, and then to make sure that we engage the public in monitoring of those efforts and awareness of investments in local communities. And then I also want to reference New York City, which has some really interesting context and efforts around this. First, with participatory budgeting, whereby text messages are used to reach out to a population and encourage them to participate in deciding how to spend a portion of public funding, and then engage them with understanding how that works. That has a huge impact on public trust, and indeed in some countries on tax remittances. So look abroad to Brazil, or look closer to home. And then finally, I'd say take a close look at what New York City is doing with its two-sided open records request system, which I dropped in the chat too. That's something that federal agencies could adopt, and we could start to see a real connection between requests coming in and then disclosures going out. I really hope you can learn from that local level and that you're able to pull in all of the different entities, particularly if New York City does in fact spin up its participation in the Open Government Partnership and begin co-creation. If that happens, there'll be an extraordinary opportunity to take the public attention and awareness and the participation of New Yorkers and then shift that attention into co-creation of the NAP6. And if New York does move forward, I hope that this team will embrace that, as you did earlier during Open Gov Week this year, and make sure that the awareness of the American people can be piggybacked on top of that into this effort too.
Thank you so much, Mr. Howard. Joyce, you have the floor.
Hello, everyone. My name is Joyce Ajayi. I currently work with the City of Little Rock in Arkansas. So on the local level, we've done some work across the 75 counties and 112 cities of the first class here in the state of Arkansas. We have what we call the Open Government Transparency Report, measuring web transparency across local government. So the report would access fiscal, administrative, and political web transparency data. These counties will be assessed on a weighted score as to the most transparent and the least transparent counties or cities in the state. We started that initiative about 6 years ago, and we've published 4 editions of the report. And in years, we've seen a lot of improvement on web transparency among county officials. The latest edition, we had county judges, mayors calling to see whether we're on the spectrum. And so that has encouraged a lot of counties to be more transparent. That effort also led to the passing of Act 564, which is a bill that mandates all counties in the state of Arkansas to publish their budgets online. Before we did that, published that edition of the report, we had maybe 2 counties that were publishing their budgets, fiscal information, data online. But with Act 564 now in the state of Arkansas, all counties do publish their budget. So that is one of the initiatives that we've been able to carry out here in Arkansas. We also have most recently the Arkansas Civic Health Index, measuring the health of open government, transparency of meetings in the state of Arkansas. That was just recently published as well. And there are a lot of stakeholders currently meeting on what we can do to move that initiative forward.
Great, thank you so much for sharing with us. We really appreciate it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will be moving to innovative approaches. I just want to make sure that we don't have any more state and locals that would like to share. Mr. Buckley, I want to make sure that your comment is a NAP6 idea on the existing work that that can be built upon, expanded, or enhanced, and not on ideation. So are we good? Is it focused on that?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Innovative approaches.
Okay. Okay, that works.
Yep.
You'll segue me into that, please. All right.
Yes. Something that works better than a request for information. And that was back in 2009, right after President Obama launched the Open Government Initiative. The National Academy for Public Administration set up on behalf of the White House, set up something called Idea Scale, Open Government Idea Scale, which was a platform and still exists for people to vote up and vote down and propose different ideas. And unfortunately, it got erased. There were thousands of people. In fact, there were 4,000 participants, much more than today. And they, over the course of a couple months, they came up with their ideas about how to make government more open and participatory, so forth and so on. And anyway, it largely was ignored by the federal government. But what I would suggest is that we go back and try that again. So it's more than just a RFI suggestion box, that it's something where people can see other people's idea, vote them up and down, and so forth and so on. I will say that one of the ideas was that there was broad consensus was to stop punishing whistleblowers in the government, which is part of open government, the idea of transparency, that you can find problems and admit to them and address them, while they're still little, and not scare or make it unsafe for government employees to point out new ways of doing things. Because when you do point out new ways of doing things when you're in government, it implies that the current way is deficient, and your boss doesn't want to hear about how his office or her office is not working as well as it should, because his or her boss might find out about it and it will show up on their performance appraisal. So there's a natural tendency for the status quo to hide areas of improvement, areas of innovation. So if there was some, program that would make it safe for anonymous reporting within the federal government, so that other people could see it, not just a Dropbox, then that would also go away to long way towards innovating. Even within this thing here, we got 44 people attending, and I guess some of them would love to say something, but they're working for the government and they don't want to say something they wish they hadn't said, because that might be innovative and disruptive to status quo. So there you go. Something to think about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley. So we are here, innovative approaches. Laura, and thank you for putting that link in the chat.
Yeah, there's some great case studies there. Some of them are federal, some of them are not, some of them are government and not, but I think they're very interesting to go read. So I thought that was a great ad from Mr. Buckley. So I hope that's the right link. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So.
Great, thank you so much. So do we have any other innovative approaches or emerging technologies? We hear a lot about AI, but I'm more than sure there are a lot of other things going on that we are not aware of. So we are here and we are listening. I'm going to call on, I see it in the chat, but I want to make sure I say the person's name correctly. Is it Madhavan? Can you share what you put in the chat? Because it went away so fast and I was trying to read it. Is that correct? Did I say your name correctly? I think it was Madhavan. Okay, maybe not. Miss Honey, I will call on you and then go back and look at the chat and see who that was. I was trying to read it.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to build on Steve's really good comment about, kind of working on the past and then using emerging technologies, although, often in government, they're not at the cutting edge. It can take a while. And I've used Idea Scale for challenges, like the challenge.gov approach and ideas management. And I remember a while back, the Madison IO and policy co-creation and really engaging the public and suggesting policy edits. I know, that platform doesn't exist more, but in the same vein as a discussion we had on local, state, tribal, and international bright spots for this idea of citizens reviewing government, could we have a open discussion of just people putting examples and bright spots that we in federal government should be aware of and tracking that could be tools, whether it's Idea Scale and some of these challenge knowledge management systems. I don't know where Madison IO went. Someone put in the chat, Poll IS. So I wanted to open that up and see if we could crowdsource, and if not now, at least maybe we could put it out later, and the GSA folks, we could do some more research. But technology where you really could put out suggestions and then in real time have those edits, that would be game changing.
Absolutely. And I want to reiterate, if you put it in the chat, it won't end up as a part of the RFI. So we really want to hear those things. So if you would come off mute and share those, that would be excellent. Mr. Howard.
Yep, just want to share the couple links I put there. One is a blast from the past. It's one of the first major commitments that the US government made in the first National Action Plan, which is to create a petition platform. While that had varying effects in terms of the outcomes, there were some important ones in terms of the White House responding over time. The last administration didn't do as much with it. This one did not adopt it at all, but it did strike me that it could be a relevant approach to getting public feedback on draft commitments for this process. If you're able to use this, the Polis software, which is designed for drafting, collaborative drafting, and if you take a look, it's made by Computational Democracy Project, that's pol.is is the domain. You'll see that it's been used by a number of governments around the country, state, local level, other countries as well, much notably Taiwan. That could be relevant for drafting commitments. And then the petition software could be relevant to then provide the American public the ability to vote up or vote down using open source software. And I'd like to specifically point towards those kinds of approaches instead of using social media, because a lot of these platforms are not designed for collaboration. They're not designed for co-creation. They're not optimized for it. And they may be something where there's already mass participation, but I'd strongly encourage the team to think about collaborative software that's specifically designed for collaboration and for drafting. Polis is one of them. There certainly could be others developed. If you look at the digital participation playbook that was developed, as I believe in, as a commitment and is still hosted by digital.gov, by the GSA, reach out to Justin Herman, who helped make that years ago, and see if there's still a community of practice across the federal government able to work on that, particularly the people who are working in public health. See if there are some lessons learned around engaging communities in structured participation. That's the top level thing, though, is that creating more structure where people have answers for specific problem statements and questions, the kinds of things you try to do in co-creation in 2022, that would be meaningful. But please do disclose those inputs. Still waiting to see all the things that we suggested in 2022 come out as a corpus. That would be a great starting point to supercharge the next NAP, to see all of the different problem statements, all the different research and groups we suggested you work with, and all the different approaches we suggested. That would be a terrific thing to seed an ideation platform with. And I'm convinced that this team is ready to do that well. You just need to have a bit more support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Howard. Laura, you shared something in the chat.
I just shared that I remember hearing something about this a couple of years ago about Kentucky. I didn't know it was poll.is, to Alex's point, but I remembered hearing something about them doing like a town hall where they generated through a platform comments from folks. I shared the Kentucky case study in there. I think that's highly interesting because that's a state government that can do it. So yes, check that out. They've got a lot of cool links. So look at it up.
Great, thank you so much. Do we have any other suggestions for innovative approaches or emerging technologies? State and locals, we'd like to hear. I'm more than sure you are doing some awesome work with emerging technologies to meet the needs of your constituents. So please, if you have something to share that we can use, let us know, something we should look at. Okay. All right, well, we will move on. So we've been sharing a lot. Are there any, we're going to resources and recommendations. Are there any reports or collections of recommendations and landscape analysis that can inform NAP 6? We did hear some from Mr. Howard, which we appreciate. I think Mr. Buckley shared some, so we thank him for that. Does anyone else have any additional reports or collections of recommendations that they'd like to share with us that can help inform NAP 6? All right, I see your what you put in the chat, Mr. Howard. Thank you. All right, we are going to call Mr. Newman.
Yes, thank you very much. One of the issues that kind of falls both on the problem identification, but I thought I'd share it under resources and recommendations, because we've done a little bit of analysis around it, is around government procurement. And one of the things that we're seeing, particularly government procurement technology, for ones, which is one of the issues that is very, very diverse between the federal government and local governments. And I think there is a huge opportunity to sort of support some of the actors who want to do better in improving that, and pull sort of like the knowledge that is both within the GSA, but also in some of the, New York City was mentioned before, and create a little bit of a group of innovators that can support each other as they improve better human-centered procurement technology. For one, and we've just published a report on that, proposing 3 principles to put people at the center of procurement technology, and I'll share that in the chat as well. The other link is, and I think that's where this is especially relevant when we look at some of the public services that government is delivering, and that's a key question around open government, and that relates to kind of like the different types of services, from unemployment services, etc. As part of all of that, there is a key issue around, what is the technology that we're using, how we're building this. So we think that there is a there would be a great opportunity. That's a great space to bring in some innovation and think a little bit more about how that can be proved by focusing particularly on human-centered approaches that includes these kinds of participatory spaces that we're discussing and that have been mentioned in the chat as well. So it's both a resource that I'll share in the chat that kind of like describes a little bit the problem and some ideas for a solution. I didn't know exactly where to put it because it's a very cross-cutting issues and there's a lot of existing work that can be built upon. So I wanted to share it here in this space as one of the areas that can improve specific processes. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Newman. Ms. Harley, I saw your hand. Did you still want to share?
I put in the chat that basically I was just going to reiterate the thing that Alex linked in the chat. That was the Blueprint for Accountability, Civil Society's recommendations for a more open government. So I was just going to reiterate that verbally so it was able to be put in the RFI.
All right, great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Mr. Buckley.
Yes, thank you. I guess this could be innovative, but the idea being that we go back to when there was an interagency working group on open government that met, that allowed civil society to attend its meetings every 3 months. And that stopped, I guess, at the end of the Obama administration, but I guess it would be innovative if it went back and did it and started that up again. That would allow for listening, excuse me, listening sessions like this, where it starts to turn into discussion and sharing of this resource and that resource. And this really is what collaboration is supposed to be about. It's not just supposed to be a Dropbox for people to deposit their thoughts and leave. So anyway, that's my suggestion, is that and perhaps in doing that, then representatives from agencies like the Environmental Protection Agency could tell us about their new policy that came out last month. EPA's Meaningful Engagement Policy came out last month, but we don't, like I said, I don't have a handy link for that, but that's the type of things that could be shared on a regular basis instead of waiting for a listening session, so to speak. And so my suggestion, the regular meetings like we used to have, and now of course we can use Zoom and so forth to do that without everybody having to travel to Washington, DC, like I used to have to do from Massachusetts. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley. We appreciate your comment. Do we have any more that would like to share any reports or recommendations that can help inform NAP 6? All right, Mr. Howard.
In addition to the, I'm still figuring out the mute button in 2024. In addition to the Blueprint for Accountability, which I should say was developed through a multi-stakeholder process and developed consensus recommendations to improve open government in the United States over the course of 2020. It was presented to the transition last administration. It is still relevant. Some of the recommendations have been taken up, like the Attorney General issuing a FOIA memorandum. Others have not. And that, I think, is currently still the state-of-the-art recommendation from civil society to the United States federal government's executive branch on how to improve. I would recommend to you, though, 2 other things. The first is the independent review mechanism, that is the Open Government Partnerships auditing arm, which has commissioned research to evaluate the design process for the 4th NAP and the 5th NAP, and a results report for the 4th NAP and a review of the 5th NAP. Those records, those documents show the deficiencies in the co-creation process, which unfortunately was not well publicized, was opaque, and did not effectively engage all of the American people. The Seizing the Moment report that was also commissioned by the Open Government Partnership was presented in 2021. I don't think any of the officials who were part of the launch are on this call. I think Justin Vail was one of them. There's a record, though, which you all have helpfully put onto the GSA's Secretariat's playlist over on YouTube. That report is still relevant, and it's a very chewy record. And if you haven't all gone through that, I highly recommend it to you and everyone else. There's a specific set of hooks that are in there that I think are important. The most important, however, is the involvement of the press. I know that that is something that may be above your pay grade in some ways in terms of this conversation, but in order to do this effectively, it's critical that the American people become aware of this process, not just simply through government, but through the kind of independent, careful reporting that exists through the world of journalism. And that the priorities of the press community are also part of this. Discussing nitty-gritty issues like requiring briefings to be on background. I noticed that within the participation guidelines of this very thing, it says no media inquiries. Okay, but aren't the press supposed to be part of open government as the fourth estate? Shouldn't we be having reporters who are part of this process, and indeed press freedom associations who will want to put in things like, for instance, a federal shield law, right? One of the things I would have loved to see be a challenge commitment is this administration fighting for a federal shield law to pass this version of Congress. That would be an extraordinary way to build trust. And the recommendations, of course, to pass such a thing are part of the IRM's ongoing recs for OGP participants. And if you look at past workshops, they are chock full of recommendations. They're chock full of the analyses that show that, unfortunately, past commitments by the United States have often focused on e-government, which we now focus on digital government, and the extent to which we can focus upon whistleblowing, upon FOIA, upon participation, upon collaboration, upon ethics reform, that would be extraordinary. And I think that if you look at
Mr.
other—
Howard, can I ask you a question? Are there reports or some collection of information that speaks to what you're saying so that we can use that?
Yes, and I will give a quick shout out to Daniel Schuman, who I think you know pretty well and probably get to know even better. He's put together, I think, one of the best compendiums of those kinds of reports. I believe it's over on GitHub, and follow up. I have no doubt that he'll be educating all of us because he's got an encyclopedia for a brain of those reports. I'm happy to follow up with all of you about that. Because we are not starting at zero. We're starting at, year 14, more or less here. And while a lot of the stuff from 14 years is gone, there's a huge opportunity to be starting on third base here and to just fly through it. But the most important thing I want to say is if you all can stand up challenge commitments that carry on into 2025, it will make a huge difference in the ability of those of us who've kept the faith and come back here to tell everyone else that you all are not just listening, but you're willing to actually do something more than you currently committed to. And for the folks who are listening from the White House with Senior Executive Service, please hear us on this. We cannot vouch for you unless you show you're moving out of listening mode and you're doing what we're asking. And if you do that, we'll sing your praises.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Appreciate your time. I believe Alexis has her hand up and she's going to go next.
Thank you. Yeah, Yvette, I hope you don't mind me jumping in here, but Alex, your comment got me thinking, looking at our little cheat sheet on the left there of the OGP's 10 challenge themes, I think we've hit a lot on access to information, public participation. There was some fiscal openness, and Alex, you of course just brought up media freedom. I am super curious to know if anyone on this call has ideas or problems they'd identified related to some of those topics we haven't really covered. So I would say like climate and environment or gender and inclusion, anti-corruption, though I think we touched a bit on that. If there are none, I mean, that in and of itself is a meaningful thing for us to learn from this call. But if there are people on the call who have ideas or have seen issues related to those topics that they think open government can help solve, would definitely encourage you to raise your hand so we can capture your thoughts and ideas.
Ms. Harley.
Thank you. I just had a question versus a comment on that, and that is perhaps unique to my organization, but we have different divisions that work on different issues, and so we have a separate climate division. I didn't click through to see that, climate and environment would be one of the things discussed today. So just curious, did you all do any outreach to the climate community? Is that something I should be asking our climate team to help with? What do you all need to get the right voices in the room to get you the input you need on that point?
And Yvette, I can take that. So Susan, I would say that's a fantastic question. The Secretariat's been around a little over a year. We of course have other people at the White House, state, USAID who've been in this longer, so have built up this network of folks who have attended our events, people we can reach out to. But for the sake of transparency, I would say I don't actually think we have a large Rolodex of folks who specify themselves as being the intersection of open government and climate and environment. So if there are people who could speak to that and would be experts, helping get the word out to them would be an immense help for us. We very much are at this stage where we are trying to build our network of networks and looking to all of you to help get this messaging out, because as I think it was Steve Buckley said right at the start of the call, most people aren't checking the Federal Register. So we will most definitely accept and appreciate any support you can provide.
Thank you, Ms. Harley. Mr. Buckley.
Right. Kind of following on from what Alexis was saying, I mentioned before, I'm not sure I mentioned that most people don't read Federal Register, although I do agree with that. I mentioned that I worked at 5 different federal agencies in DC during my 25 years down there as an environmental engineer. And I came to the conclusion that the science and engineering part were the easy part. Clearing up pollution and so forth. The hard part was the people part, where you were involving the decision makers and the people who were going to be involved in the decision-making process to decide, well, exactly how are we going to go about fixing this in a way that makes the most people happy with the least amount of cost. So that's why it attracted me, since leaving the federal service, to the open government program that President Obama started, was that if you can do the basics of making things clear, transparency, involving people in the decisions, participation, and if you can do that across the board or in the most fundamental projects, not the big stuff like climate, but the stuff like where do we put the new crosswalk? If you can't do it for simple Main Street type of problems, and I've gone there and it's really, and yes, it's even for simple Main Street, how do we make it more pedestrian friendly? If you can't do it there, then you can't do it with the big stuff. So that's my suggestion. As an environmentalist, I said, we could solve all that. We know how to solve the problem. It's not science that's holding things back with climate. It's the people part, explaining it to them in a way that they can understand. But like I said, if you can't do it on a fundamental level, and even amongst people like ourselves who are supposedly advocates of listening and collaboration, then you can't do it for the big complicated stuff like fiscal openness and anti-corruption and so forth. So that's my suggestion. Keep it simple, learn the basics, and then ramp up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley. I just saw I'm seeing some great suggestions in the chat. I just want to remind you that it won't be a part of the record if you don't share it with us. So please, if you choose to, share. Do we have any more suggestions for resources and recommendations, or or anything in reference to some of the topics that we did not touch on that Alexis mentioned. Okay. Or do you have any questions? That was my other part. Okay, Alexis, I will turn it back over to you.
Great, thank you. So we had 15 more minutes scheduled. So let's actually just pause another 15 seconds and have the floor. If anyone who hasn't spoken yet wants to take this last opportunity to share their thoughts, absolutely all thoughts NAP6 related are welcome. And again, you don't have to come on camera. You put your name, whatever you want it to be. We just would love to hear ideas, innovative approaches, all of that. So we will do that teacher trick of an awkward silence just for a few seconds and see if we can get some people participating.
Alexis, I just wanted to throw this out. Everyone, please make sure you share the RFI with your different circles. I just wanted to throw that out. Thanks.
Thank you for that. All right, anyone who wants to use the last few minutes to share their thoughts for the first time? Written feedback is certainly welcome, but there's something special about sharing it with this group and potentially being able to bounce ideas off one another. Okay, we'll stop the game of chicken for now. Again, you all know how, hopefully know how to send feedback via the RFI. If you run into any issues, please just reach out to the Secretariat's inbox and we can try to help you troubleshoot submitting comments. Let's see, there were some great ideas that came up today. So we are looking forward to having this captured. And as mentioned at the top of the meeting, we will submit a single sort of overview, summary, transcript of what was discussed today to the RFI. So that is captured and given to the Federal Advisory Committee and agencies and everyone who's involved in developing NAP6. So I guess any final questions around the NAP6 process before we move to the next slide and work towards wrapping up the meeting? Okay, let's jump to the next one if we could. Perfect. So for those of you who are members of civil society, you are welcome to join a mailing list that we have. This is outward facing, so this lets us inform people of our events or activities, things like the RFI. Because we are limited in the tool that we have at our disposal that we are permitted by our lawyers to use, this is outward facing, so we are very much looking to all of you to help amplify our messages. So please feel free to forward things on that come from this mailing list. I know some of you on the call do, and it is greatly appreciated. The more people who know about this work that everyone is taking part in, definitely the better. So feel free to join this listserv. If you are government, we actually have a separate mailing list that is government focused. A lot of overlap, but also some distinct things that go to the different groups. So if you're interested in that, you can see the information, I believe, on the U.S. Government Secretariat's webpage on gsa.gov. And if you can't find it, just shoot us an email and we will help you. Let's see here. And then one more slide. Okay, and then we also have a LinkedIn that was launched recently. Big thanks to Laura Zachary for really taking the lead in getting this going. Public participation, we've talked about so much today. Not everyone is looking at RFIs. Not everyone is necessarily going to be on the email lists that we have access to. So we are trying to tap into new mechanisms of reaching people. Other good ideas are brought up today, which are definitely food for thought. Things like more direct outreach rather than having a go-between. So we'll look into that. But in the meantime, we are also posting a lot of material here, and we welcome you liking the page, following us, reposting, whatever the LinkedIn lingo is. And this is another good way to stay apprised of what's going on in the broader open government space. And it actually looks like, I won't close this out just yet because we've had one person put something in the chat, and then we have 2 hands raised. And I believe, Yvette, it was Madhavan you called on earlier who didn't
Yes, it
unmute at that time.
was.
So
Yes, it was.
Hello, everyone. Good meeting you all. I was just wondering, did we use one of those AI apps like ChatGPT, Claude, and Shadow, to cure this particular documents and all? If we didn't, we may enjoy, playing with that. Good luck. And good meeting you all.
Thank you.
let's see, Alex, did you want to have the final audience comment? You've got great thoughts today.
Well, thank you for that. I would say that it would be wonderful if you could find a way to post the emails you're sending to that listserv to LinkedIn. I know there may be different hoops you have to jump through, different sign-offs, but that channel that you've created there's a lot of potential for structured participation and dialogue. And if you could jumpstart that by engaging, by posting the terrific messages you're sending there, highlighting reports, highlighting events, highlighting the RFI, but all the different work you're doing, if you could put that there at that public URL, that would be terrific. As I think you know, we are forwarding this on to the Google group that's been around for a long time. That does create a public record and URL, but it would be fantastic if we could hear from you, just because it's the same voice, it's the same content. If you could create that record there, and I know I've asked for this elsewhere, but if you could make sure that's also cross-posted to your website so that no one has to join that service to read it, that would also be meaningful, because you're doing terrific work. If you could keep showing your work, that would enable all of us to easily point to where it is and to celebrate it, because I think that merits it. And as does this effort you've made right here. You created dialogue, and you were responsive in chat, and you're being responsive right now. And for those of us who sometimes have trouble engaging different parts of government, it's always nice to see smiling faces and people who are clearly, genuinely committed, not just to the principles of open government, but applying them. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And, thank you to everyone who participated. Suggestions like that are very much welcome. The LinkedIn is brand new. Our website, fairly new. We are continuously trying to iterate on it. So send us those ideas, and we're going to keep trying to make everything better and more open and transparent. So fantastic ideas here today for NAP6. Excellent resources that we're going to take a look at. We saw that timeline at the beginning. There's a lot of work that has to happen at a fairly quick pace to make NAP6 a success. And this conversation today was NAP6 focused. We are, of course, going to continue to have other conversations. We're going to, in the future, look at how NAP5 was done in terms of implementation. Where were the successes? Where were the low points? We're going to have broader conversations about how is open government being approached. I have to imagine, election happens. We're going to have a new administration. We're going to want to have conversations around that. So today, we appreciate you all focusing on NAP6 and ideas and, what can be fixed, what needs to be fixed, where are there possible solutions. That was today's aim. And I think we got a lot of really fantastic suggestions out of this. To repeat what Yvette said, just to hammer it home. Unfortunately, the chat is great, but we're not going to be able to take that into the formal response. So if there's anything you didn't have the chance to say, please do send it as a response to the RFI. You can be completely flexible with the format you send something in. We want to hear all of these brilliant ideas and make sure they are captured and part of the public record. So there's no chance of them not being used or looked at least and analyzed. So with that, I think we are good to close this. Any remaining questions that come up, issues with any of the tools, you could reach out to the email that Beth just put in the chat, opengovernmentsecretariat@gsa.gov. And, we look forward to keeping you all apprised and engaged as we continue with the NAP 6 development process. So thank you all so much for joining today.